inSecure, Trusting the Lord in Uncertain Times by Stephanie D. Moore. Day 8, The Beginning. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then, when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. When the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken into King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all the nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Esther chapter 1, verses 19 through 20, and Esther 2, verses 15 through 18. Belief. Queen Esther. Esther 1 through 10. King Xerxes hosted a profound celebration for his kingdom. It began with 180 days of displaying his wealth and majesty, after which the elaborate affair ended with a 7-day banquet for the entire kingdom. At the banquet, men and women enjoyed the festivities in separate places. The king wished for Vashti to dance for he and his guests. The king asked his 7 eunuchs to go and retrieve Queen Vashti, but she refused. Furious and burning with anger, the king asked his 7 nobles for advice. They suggested he banish the queen unless their wives rise and decide to disrespect them because of her example. The king agreed. That evening, when his fury had passed, his attendants suggested he find another queen with a multifaceted selection process. The king thought this was a good idea. He made it so. Chosen. Esther was admitted into the selection process as a possible new queen for King Xerxes. Esther was an incredibly beautiful young lady that grew up as a Jew, but her uncle Mordecai warned her to never reveal her heritage. So she was careful in her decisions and gracious in her actions. Esther was favored more by the king than any of the other women. The king named her queen, and she began her reign. Harm. Soon after, Mordecai, her uncle, heard of a scheme to kill the king and told Esther. Esther promptly told the king. The 2 men who plotted to kill King Xerxes were held accountable by death. Mordecai never received acknowledgement for saving the king's life, but it was written into the kingdom's book of Acts. Immediately after, Haman was promoted to principal minister and named second in command to King Xerxes. An edict went out that all should bow to him and respect him, but Mordecai refused. This angered Haman. When he asked why he would not bow to him, Mordecai responded that he was a Jew, and this went against their customs. This angered Haman even more. When it came time to issue laws, Haman suggested a law to destroy the entire nation of Jews within the kingdom. He cited the Jews would be harmful to the kingdom because they did not respect the kingdom's laws. He even offered the king a bribe to make it so. King Xerxes told him to keep his money and allowed Haman to do with the Jews as he wished. Haman was delighted and carried out the law. He planned to destroy all the Jews. If I perish. When Mordecai discovered what had been done, he lamented greatly and cried loudly walking through the streets. Word of his behavior got back to Queen Esther, and she called him to see what was going on. He insisted she help him, and that if she refused, the Lord would send help, but she and her house would be destroyed. She and her servants fasted for 3 days and nights without food or drink. She decided, I will go before the king, even if I have not been summoned. This action could have resulted in death. If I perish, let me perish, she told herself. She created an exquisite banquet and went before the king. He was pleased to see her, as he had not seen her for more than 30 days. He asked, "What is your petition? What is your request? You can have up to half of the kingdom." She told him that if it pleased him, let her invite he and his servant Haman to a banquet. They attended the banquet, and again he asked her, "What is your petition? What is your request? You can have up to half of the kingdom." Once again, she asked that if it pleased him, she would like both to attend another banquet the next evening, and at that time she would reveal her request. A plan to kill, a plan to honor. After the banquet, Haman was on cloud 9, but as soon as he saw Mordecai, he became angry all over again. He went home and bragged to his friends of his elevated stature and how he had everything he desired. But the behavior of Mordecai disturbed him deeply. His wife told him to create a 50-foot pole and asked the king to impale Mordecai on it the next morning. He thought this was a great idea, and he had the pole made that evening. Later, when the king is in bed, he asked his assistants to read him the royal notes from the book of Acts committed within the kingdom. The story of Mordecai revealing the two men who attempted to take his life is told. He asked, "Has this man been honored?" "No," they say. He then asks, "Who was in the court?" It was Haman, who had come to ask the king's permission to kill Mordecai. The king asks Haman, "What should I do for a man that deserves great honor?" Haman thought the king must be referring to him, so he began to describe a prominent and boisterous way to honor the man. The king, pleased with his answer, replied, "Excellent. Do this with Mordecai who sits by the gate, right now." Haman was shocked and disappointed, but did as he was told. He placed the royal robe on Mordecai, mounted him to the king's horse, and walked him through the town, declaring, "This is what the king does to the men he wishes to honor." Afterward, Haman went home to tell his wife. She replied, "You must be good to this man who is a Jew, because your fate has turned into his favor." Immediately, Haman was summoned to the second banquet with Queen Esther. What is your petition? During the banquet, a final time, the king asks, "What is your petition? What is your request? You can have up to half of the kingdom." Esther replied, "I want you to save my life. This is my petition. I want you to save my family. This is my request. For your servant Haman, the enemy and adversary, has ordered us to death. If he had simply ordered us to a life of slavery, I would not bother the king with this. But since he has decreed death, I must beg for our lives." To this the king became terribly angry and went into the palace garden. Haman, who was determined that the king's mind was made up, begged Esther for his life. He fell on the couch where she was sitting just as the king walked back into the room with his eunuchs. "Will you molest her also?" he asked, even angrier. The eunuch told of a 50-foot pole Haman had set up at his house, to which the king ordered Haman to be impaled upon. New beginnings. After the king's anger subsided, he appointed Haman's estate to Esther. He gave Mordecai the signet ring that once belonged to Haman and appointed him with Haman's position. He negated the decree issued against the Jews. At the appointed time to enact the law that Haman put into action, a reversal of fortune took place. The Jews destroyed their enemies and captured Haman's 10 sons. His sons were impaled, but their fortunes left. Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews of goodwill and assurance to the 127 provinces. In the kingdom, and many were converted to Jews because of the favor of the Jews. Esther appointed Haman head over Haman's estate, and Esther appointed Mordecai head over Haman's estate, and Mordecai served as second in command to King Xerxes. Action. Esther was a humble and loyal servant to God. Her uncle Mordecai was a good advisor and